Our second lesson this morning comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 43 through 51. If you'd like to follow along in your pew Bible, you can find it on page 92. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Nathanael said to him, Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite, in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." The word of the Lord. Whew, that was a tongue twister this morning. Believe it or not, when I was young, I wasn't very tall. In most of my grade school class pictures, you can find me right there on the front row with most of the short kids sitting. I can remember being one of the smallest children in my kindergarten class. One time we had a visitor who came to the door of our classroom carrying something. I don't even remember what they were carrying now, but I remember this moment in slow motion because whatever it was, the teacher wasn't quite prepared for the visitor yet, and everyone just got up and ran to the door and surrounded the person. There was a lot of pushing and shoving. I was at the back of the crowd, and I was too little to see. I couldn't see what the visitor had in their hand. I was right in there with everyone else, pushing and shoving, trying desperately to make my way to the front of this kindergarten huddle, pleading all the while with my classmates, "Let me see. Let me see." Epiphany is a season of light. It's a season of revelation, of revealing, of searching and finding, of questioning and discovering, of seeing things in a whole new way. It's a season where we stand firmly within the boundaries of our reality and glimpse at the margin of what is just out of reach. The season begs us to try and glimpse something else, something that could be. As we discussed last week, the generic definition of an epiphany is a moment of sudden revelation or insight. On the Christian calendar, today is the second Sunday of Epiphany. Ding, ding. In many ways, I imagine Christians all over the world, firmly planted in our own realities. Me here at St. Barnabas, our friends in Voy firmly planted in their location of St. Stephen's, and even my friends in Palestine, dealing with a completely different reality. And yet all of us realizing that there is something calling to us, something beckoning us. Come and see. And even though Advent is over, many of us find we are still longing for that sudden revelation or insight that will change our whole lives, change how we see the whole world. The Gospel of John is all about how we see things. This gospel is full of exclamations like, behold, look, see. In this gospel, John the Baptist's confession of Jesus include the words, look, the Lamb of God. The first words that Jesus speaks in this gospel are, what are you looking for? In our reading today, Jesus tells Nathanael, you will see greater things than these. And the Gospel of John does not disappoint. The disciples see Jesus turn water into wine. They see Jesus walk on water. They watch as a man born blind receives his sight. When Jesus wept at Lazarus' death, those looking on exclaimed, see how he loved him. After his death, Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene and then later appears to the disciples in a locked room. Jesus shows Thomas his hands and his side, and it's not until Thomas sees that he believes. This gospel has vision. The author insists that we too come and see. In this morning's reading from the Gospel of John, Jesus invites Philip, follow me. Philip, in turn, finds someone else to invite. In the passage immediately prior to this one, a similar thing happens. Jesus invites Andrew. And Andrew, in turn, invites his brother Simon, who is then renamed Cephas, Peter. But Philip doesn't invite his brother. He invites a friend. And this time it's a little more complicated because his friend Nathanael is a realist, is a skeptic. Nathanael, the realist, has an epiphany in what we read this morning and discovers that seeing really is believing. But make no mistake, this story is not about what Nathanael sees. It's a story about what Jesus sees. It's a story about vision and about possibility. It's a story about promise. Salvation and discipleship become possible for Nathanael, not because of what Nathanael sees in Jesus, but because of what Jesus sees in Nathanael. See, when Nathanael first learns about Jesus from his friend Philip, he's not impressed. He knows that the Messiah, the one in whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote about, was expected to come from Judah, not from Israel. And Nazareth was not in Judah. Not only that, but Nazareth was this tiny little town about which there was absolutely nothing special. Nathanael, the realist, is not quite as excited as Andrew or Peter or Philip was. He says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Now, I'm sure that many of us have had or do have friends like Nathanael. We get all excited about something that's happening in our lives or something that might happen in our lives, perhaps going in a new direction or something unexpected. And there's always that one friend. You know the one I'm talking about. The one that's there to warn you, to bring you back down to reality. Are you sure? Don't go and get all excited about this until you've done all your research. Have you really thought this thing all the way through? Years ago, Saturday Night Live did a skit on this type of friend. Her name was Debbie Downer. Some of you remember. Whenever anyone said something positive or was excited about something happening in their life, Debbie Downer could end it in a second with one of her many negative comments followed by a wah, wah. My family has actually found that we all have our Debbie Downer moments. And to this day, whenever any one of us says something that is particularly discouraging during a time of excitement, we check each other. All we have to say is, wah, wah. So here's Nathaniel, trying to be the realist that he is, and bring a little sensibility back to his friend Philip, giving him the wah, wah, but Philip isn't buying it. He's already seen. He knows he doesn't need to argue. He doesn't need to explain or convince or threaten him. So he simply says, "Come and see." And Nathaniel does. He goes with Philip. And before Nathaniel can really even get a good look at Jesus, when Jesus sees Nathaniel coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite, in whom there is no deceit." Jesus recognized him. He saw him. And Nathaniel knew immediately that he had been seen. "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Now, most people think that when they see something with their own eyes, then they can believe it, to be trustworthy, to be true. But seeing is actually a very selective sense. We can all witness the same event, and each of us would concentrate on different details. Ask any policeman. We have choices when it comes to what we see when we look at something or an event or someone. Jesus could have said anything about Nathaniel. He could have said, "Here is truly a lazy man who sits around all day under the fig tree and doesn't listen to anything anyone says or believe anything anyone tells him." He could have said, "Here is truly a man who will never believe. He's a perpetual skeptic." He could have said, "Here is truly a man who is rude and insensitive, whose prejudices run too deep, who judges before he even meets people, who dismisses people, the very people who might have something to offer him." He could have said, "Here is truly a man that I am not interested in knowing at all, because he wouldn't even believe his friend's testimony about me." He could have said a number of things. And any one of those things could have been equally true about Nathaniel. But what he says about Nathaniel is that he sees an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. He sees potential. He sees truth. He sees promise. He sees the best of who Nathaniel can be. He sees the strengths that he would like to cultivate in this particular follower. That's not to say he didn't see everything else that Nathaniel was, but what he chooses to see, what he chooses to give voice and life to, is potential, is promise. Before Nathaniel even realizes or has time to process what has happened, he's all in. "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Exclamation points abound. Being seen has given Nathaniel an epiphany, a holy moment of clarity, A moment in which everything that came before and everything he will endure after suddenly become full of worth, because Nathanael knows he is full of worth. For a moment, Nathanael sees what Jesus sees, and he cannot imagine going back to his old way of seeing. He decides then and there to follow Jesus. Nathanael and Philip and Andrew and Peter follow Jesus around throughout the Gospel of John. Let me see, let me see. They can't get enough. They always want to see this way. But there are others throughout this entire gospel narrative. John the Baptist, the woman from Samaria, the man born blind, the royal official from Capernaum, Mary Magdalene, Thomas. They're all seen in this gospel, and each of them will long to see even more, to see what Jesus sees. This is how the gospel spreads in John. Each one is seen and then tells another. And soon many are seeing Jesus, seeing God, seeing themselves, seeing each other, seeing the world in a brand new way. In the Gospel of John, discipleship begins when one is seen. And it continues as people try to articulate what that means and share it with others. And it spreads then when people begin to see the world and each other the way that Jesus does. That's something we should pray for today. Let me see. Let me see. Amen.